Hey folks, welcome back. I'm Dave and we're here in my shop where I build E-War guitars. This is going to be episode number 16 where we're building my version of a Telecaster. I've used a basic Tele shape. I put in P90 pickups. I did a big round over on the edge here to make it kind of curvy looking. I did a set neck. I did a tapered inlays in the neck, and I did a tilt back headstock with 3x3 tuners. So it's a Tele shape, but it's kind of my version of a Tele. I mean, you know, when most people think of electric guitar, this is probably the first thing to pop into their head. It's just hard to beat that shape. But I wanted to kind of do my own thing with it, so this is what I came up with. So this series, I've spent the first portion of this series learning how to use my CNC machine, and I've never used one before, and I wanted to do it on this guitar right here because the first guitar I ever built was a Tele. So the first CNC guitar I built, I wanted it to be a Tele too. So anyway, if you'd like to check that out, I'll go ahead and post a link up here for the whole series. You can go back and check that out. But then come on back because this video is going to be the fourth in the guitar finishing portion of this series of videos. So in the first video on finishing, we did the Simtex sealer. We sanded up the body and the neck first. We did 2 rounds of Simtex sealer. And then in the second video, we applied our three different layers of paint: the black base, the pearl mid coat, and then the candy top coat. In the third of the finishing videos, we applied 4 coats of Tamco's Euroclear, their HC2104, I think it is. It's a high solids, high gloss, clear top coat, and it came out really nice. I mean, it sprayed up beautifully. I've got a little bit of orange peel, but nothing too bad. I've got just the slightest bit of dust here and there on the thing, but nothing that won't sand out. And it's looking really good. Oh, and we also built a little, we built up this finish in between the painted body and the unpainted neck, and we built up some finish there, and I now have a really smooth transition between the two. So anyway, it is in good shape. It's been sitting for about 3 days now, so it's that's plenty of time for this finish to cure out enough for us to move forward and start the buffing and polishing process. And that's what we're going to do in this video. So what we're going to do is, first what I've got to do is I've got to go through and I've got to sand everything. And I'm going to use the same products I've been using in the previous finishing videos. And that's this Super Acelix paper. And in this one, I believe I'm going to get away with the 800 grit to start with. This should be enough to knock down whatever orange peel I got in there and get it completely leveled back out again and ready to go. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit it with 1000 grit, 1200 grit, 1500 grit, and then I'm also going to hit it with the Trizact foam pad. It's a polishing pad is what it is, and it's a 3000 grit. I've got 3000 and 8000. I've never used the 8000 before, because after the 3000 I'm going to move on to the buffer. But we're going to go ahead and hit it. After all these other grits, we're going to go over it real quick with the 3000 grit Trizact, and before we move on to the buffing machine. Now, typically what happens with this is the 800 grit, I'll have to spend a little more time on it, work on it to get everything leveled back out. Then all the rest of these grits, it'll really be just a matter of going through it, going over everything rather quickly, just to get rid of the previous grits scratches, which will work us up to a point where we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on that buffing machine. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get that camera turned down, and we're going to start at it with the 800 grit. And once we got it all sanded up, and I'll point out some things as I'm going with that, once we get it all sanded up, then we'll move on over to the buffing machine over there, and I'll kind of go through what we're going to do with that too. Anyhow, so let's do that right now. Let's go ahead and turn that camera down and get rolling with it. So this is going to be pretty telling right from the start as whether or not this 800 is going to be enough. I mean, I don't want to spend all day sanding with 800. If I've got to, I'll drop back to 600. But let's just take a quick look here and see what this is looking like. Yeah, not too bad. So you can see that orange peel, it's already almost gone away right over here. The less aggressive of a grit I have to use, the better, because the worst thing we could do right now is sand through this finish and get down to the paint, because then we will be starting all over again from the beginning. So staying away from those coarser grits. is what I plan on trying to do and get through this. And I think we'll be able to. That's looking pretty good already. I love how that stuff cleans up. It gets that little bit of powder built up, and all you gotta do is wipe it on a towel, and that will go away. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. When I get to this spot, I like to hold it up to the light, and I look for any of those little shiny spots like we talked about in the previous videos. And I still got some, but it's coming out pretty quickly. So I believe this 800 is going to be good. Okay, so that is the 800 grit, and I've gone over every last little thing. I was very careful about it. I spent some extra time, I hope I showed it, taking down this, this ridge here made from the clear gloss where it meets the edge of the fretboard. I used 600 grit for that just to work it down a little bit quicker. And as soon as the ridge went away, I switched back to the 800 because I don't really want to cut through that. But anyway, so I think it looks good. And it's hard for me to show this in the camera, but as I was going, I'm constantly holding it up to the light like so. I've got a bright light over there, and I hold it up like this, and I'm looking for those little shiny spots. Like I basically talked about throughout this whole little 4-part series on finishing a guitar. But anyway, I think it looks great. So now I'm gonna proceed forward doing exactly the same thing, only without as much work. I'm gonna do 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, and then 3,000. Now each of those grits, instead of looking for dust specks to get rid of or orange peel or whatever, I'm really just gonna try to take out the scratches from the 800 grit sandpaper that I just used. So anyway, I'm gonna turn the camera back down, and we're gonna run through that real quick, and then we're gonna get over on the buffing machine, and we're gonna talk about that for a minute before I start buffing. Okay, so this guy is ready to go now. So what I did, just a quick recap, I sanded everything with the 800 grit Super Aslix paper. And now on the first round with the 800, it took probably about 30 minutes to go through it because, like I said, I was getting out the orange peel, got any specks of dust and anything. And I went over everything, body and neck, and my little control cavity cover. And then I spent probably 5 to 10 minutes with each of 1,000 grit, 1,200, 1,500, and then the 3,000 grit Trizact buffing pad or sanding pad. And I'll tell you what, it is just absolutely silky smooth, and it really looks good. And I think we're definitely ready to take this to the buffer. But what I also did was the little kit of Trizact I bought, it came with some 8,000 grit sanding pads as well, and I went ahead and did the neck with the 8,000 grit. And I don't know if that's going to show up in the video or not, but that neck looks buffed just about. It may be just slightly less shiny than if I'd buffed it out. And I did the headstock too. Feels absolutely smooth as silk. I think I'm going to leave it there. I think I'm going to try it out with the neck right there. I was going to do kind of a flat finish on the neck anyhow. And but I think I've got that same result with this. It's a little less shiny. It's still shiny, but a little less shiny, I think, than the body's going to wind up being. So I believe I'm going to leave that neck just like that. At least we'll give it a try anyhow, see how that works out. So what I'm going to do before I take you over to the buffing machine is I'm going to go ahead and tape off this neck. So as I'm buffing the body, I'm not getting any onto the neck. So, because I want a nice distinct line in between the super shiny body and a slightly less shiny neck, if that makes any sense. So Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and mask this off real quick. Then I'll take you over the buffing machine, and I'm going to show you the buffing wheels I'm going to use and the compounds I use for it too. So, and then we'll see if we can't get this thing shining. Okay, so we're getting ready to buff this guitar up, and before I did that, I wanted to kind of stop for a second and show you my little buffing machine I made and talk about the different compounds and everything I use to do it. So this is just a basic buffing machine. It's nothing more than a threaded shaft driven by a 1/2 horsepower motor, might even be a 1/3 horsepower motor. And I've got it geared down to where it's spinning about somewhere between 800 and 900 RPMs. It runs real nice. It's nice and quiet and solid and everything. I built this based on one I saw on a YouTube channel, Highline Guitars, Chris Monk, who's an excellent teacher. And he has a very good channel. And he now sells a plan for this buffing machine that's very similar to this. But I built this based on one of his older ones that I think that was before he had plans available. But like I said, if you thought you might want to buy one, I'd check out his site at Highline Guitars, and he's got plans for this available. Anyway, that being said, so I made the little buffing machine, and on mine I also built a little shroud around it because this is basically mounted right up against the wall, and I've got my vac system going up under this shroud because these buffing wheels, they'll throw off a lot of dust and stuff into the air. A lot of this little fuzzy stuff will fly around the air, so I just built this little shroud over to try to trap some of that, some of the fuzzies from floating up in the air. But anyway, enough about that. So what I'm going to do is, this is a flannel wheel, okay? And on the flannel wheel, I use this. This is a very fine compound. It's Menzerna. The coarseness is very fine. It's a number 4. I'll use that on the flannel wheel, and that'll be the first one I'm going to use. I also have these 2 coarse ones. I have a medium and I have a coarse, and I think with sanding that like we did up to 3000 grit, I don't think I'm going to have to use either of these 2. If I did, I'll be using one of these. This is my medium wheel and that's my coarse wheel. You have a different buff wheel for each coarseness of compounds you have. So I don't think I'm going to need those, but we'll find out here in a second. I'm going to start with the very fine, this one right here. And if I think I'm going to need to drop back, I'll pull that off. I'll put on this other one. I'll switch to my medium compound and we'll start with that. I don't think we're going to have to, but we'll find out in a second. Anyway, so after we're done with that on the flannel wheel, I've got this Domit cotton wheel over here. And on this one, I'm going to use this Glanz Max 15, which is an ultra high gloss polishing compound. And that usually really brings out a shine. I mean, it's really, I just got this one, a couple of guitars ago, and what a difference it makes. It's really, really worth it. And something too is, now this is a 12-inch buffing wheel, and this one is a 16. From now on, if I ever buy any more buffing wheels, they're going to be 16-inch, because this one here is so close to all this stuff going on here. It's you got to really be careful when you're working your guitar in there, because you're just kind of so close to the wooden frame and the shroud and that big nut spinning there too. So anyway, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to flip this on. I'm going to first use this buffing rake, and it'll kind of soften up all the fibers in the wheel. I'll put some compound on the thing and start buffing away. Anyway, let me go grab that guitar and we're going to get going on that right now. All right, so we are totally buffed up now. Went up through that Menzerna Ultra Fine, and I would say about 95% of this looks great. And unfortunately, it's that 5% that's gonna make me sand this thing back down and start all over again. I'm not gonna bother videoing any of that, but I'm just gonna do it. But I do wanna explain to you, I made 3 mistakes that is gonna cause me to redo this. And let me tell you what they are. The first mistake is, I mentioned it sat for 3 days, and the manufacturer will tell you that, you know, after 24 hours you could sand it and buff this surface off. At least I think that's what the manufacturer says. 3 days is not enough, and I'll tell you why. What I did was, after I got done sanding everything down, which sanded beautifully, I remember I went up to the 3000 grit and 8000 on the neck, I said I was going to tape off this neck so I got a nice decent cutoff line in between the super shiny body and a partially shiny neck. And when I did that, I went ahead and wrapped the bottom of the guitar in this cloth t-shirt right here, very soft cotton t-shirt, and I put it in my leg vise and I clamped it at the bottom very lightly with my leg vise. Well, you know, hard enough to hold it up straight, but that pressure from the leg vise, there's a lot more pressure in those things than you might think. The pressure from that leg vise, even though it was slight, was enough to put the impression from this cloth, the fabric, into the finish. And I didn't see that until I started buffing. As soon as I started buffing, I saw it. I shut off the buffer and I said, well, let me go back and sand it. So I resanded it was just at the bottom on both the front and back. I went back and I resanded. I started at the 800 grit and I worked my way back up through. Tried buffing it again, wasn't quite enough. It showed, it's very slight, it's still there now. I never did get it all out. Sanded it again, and I was getting nervous sanding like that because, you know, this finish is only so thick and you definitely don't want to cut through that and get into those other base colors. So I was very cautious about that, and then I went ahead and I upped the buffing wheel to the medium, and I started buffing it off, and I really thought I was getting out, and I got very, very close. So those were the 2 mistakes. One was I only waited 3 days. I should have waited 2 weeks at least. That's what I've done in the past and it's always been fine. The second mistake was clamping it in that vise. I should have never done that. Putting pressure on these finishes, especially after only 3 days, it's going to cause an impression in the finish that I wasn't able to get out. And the third mistake was, I think I was frustrated by this time and not being as careful as I could, but I actually caught this lip right here when I was buffing. And I probably can't, you probably won't be able to see it, it's actually right here. I actually cut down to the black. I cut through. You almost can't see it, but it just bugs the heck out of me. And I can't let that go because it'll be right along the edge of my little control cover here. So anyway, that's the way it goes. You know, I'm just learning this stuff. I'm trying to point out how I'm doing things and hoping I can help somebody somewhere along the way avoid the mistakes I made. Because after all, I've learned how to build guitars off of guys on YouTube, and that's why I'm doing this. I'm trying to like add to the community and try to help the, you know, the next people coming along that want to learn how to do this, so I'm doing it. So anyway, this video turned out to be one of those ones where I say, don't do what I did, you know, try to learn from my mistakes. Anyway, I still love doing it, and I think the guitar really came out cool, and once I get it repainted and refinished, I think it's going to be cool all over again. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week. God bless you. And come on back next time, because I believe next week I'm going to be starting my GGBO 2022 build-off guitar. I know it's getting kind of late in the game, so I got to get rolling with that. Anyway, God bless you, and we'll see you all in the next one.